Great, welcome to our training. This is an introduction on using the Droplet form builder. My name is Shanna. I am the customer education manager here at Droplet. I also have Pluto, who is one of our implementation consultants, and they will be helping us out in the chat today. So if you have any questions that pop up during our session, please throw them into the chat and Pluto will either stop me so we can demonstrate your question, as I'm sure it will be applicable to other people, or be able to answer the question in the chat. I'll also save some time at the very end to be able to answer any questions. So today we're going to introduce you to the form builder and just give you an overview of everything you need to get started with building form layouts and workflows. As you work, you will likely have questions, so you can use our documentation as a reference and resource, or stop by our open office hours, and these are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons. It's a great time to give us very specific questions for forms you are working on. And you can register for that in the link in the chat. Okay, so if you have form builder permissions, you will see some new actions on the forms page. So if we go into this dummy account, this demo account, I can go onto the forms page and I can see that I have this builder button here. And I also have two more buttons up top. So import and this plus form button. If you don't see these yet, we'll get your permissions updated shortly after this session. So you'll have access to everything you see here. Please throw your name and organization into the chat so we can get those updated for you. This import option here is likely not a function you will use. This is how our team imports Droplet files. Import is a good option if you have forms you would like to duplicate in your organization. Say I have this annual health record update and emergency contact, and I have a form that is just slightly different from that. I can duplicate the form by exporting it. If I open up the builder, this export button, and then using that .droplet file, and import it into the organization, it will create a duplicate for you, which you will be able to rename and add a description and be able to edit. And then we have this plus form button. This is where we will be starting our journey in building forms. So creating a new form. If you ever need to make edits to forms, that would be the builder button on the form card itself. And I wanted to point out real quick, and I have this tab open already, but if you click this help button, you'll be able to go into our documentation and you can search for form templates. These are existing forms that we have created like a bit of a template for. So if you want any of these, we reach out to support@droplet.io and tell us the name of the form you'd like added to your organization, and we can drop those in there for you, and you'll be able to make the small updates that you need to. Awesome. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to throw a little poll up here. There are two different ways to create a new form. One is from scratch and one is generated from a PDF or an image. So the poll is going to ask you which you would like to see built out today. So if we start building from a PDF or start building from scratch. So go ahead and fill out that poll and I will take whatever majority says here. Awesome. Okay, we will start building from scratch. But I will show you quickly what it looks like if you wanted to generate from a PDF. After you enter in the name and description and create the form, it will ask for an upload which you add here, and then it'll open up the form for you. So I am building out an application form, and I'm just going to put the date here to make it a unique name, because Droplet won't allow you to have the same name of form within your organization. And the description is Droplet Community Schools application. Since this is an application, I'm going to be making this available to the public. So I do not want to use any of these toggles here. This is an authentication barrier to our form. So it requires anybody who tries to access that URL to sign into Droplet before being able to even view the form. And then if you toggle this one, they won't even be able to submit the form unless they are signed in, which is great for forms that you want only available to your organization. Okay, when I click that create button, it opens a new tab here. And we do not have a back home button on our builder. So I try to keep this page open. All right, so I'm gonna go over what quick overview of what you are seeing here. So here we have the name of our form. You see this draft, which was created at this time today. If I click that drop down, I can see that when it was saved, when it was created. And once I publish, this will no longer say draft, it will say published. And say I make I notice that it's published, but I see some errors on the published version. I would create a new draft to be able to make any edits. And then you see two toggles here for two of our layers, the form layer and the workflow layer, which will be big pieces in building out your form. Here I can see that all changes have been saved. If I want to publish, I would click this button here, but I'm not ready for that. This toggle over here takes you from the visual builder to the code editor. If you are familiar with JavaScript and React type languages, you may want to work more in here. Otherwise, what we're going to do is work within this visual builder. This 3-dot hamburger menu here gives you a few options. I showed you that export button earlier. You can also upload any assets. That includes like PDFs or images to be able to utilize those within your form. You also have this debug, which we will get to in a minute, and this test workflow, which I won't get to, but I will provide a link that'll help you navigate that area. And then your profile up here. And within this left side panel, we have a few things. So one, we're in the build tab here, which means I am seeing all of the components available to drag over and drop into the form. I'm also seeing something down here, which we call the navigation tree. And this will show you where you are at in the form. So if you hover over any of that, it'll give you an idea of where those are in the form. And if I toggle, if I click the drop down here, I can see the submitter name or the submitter email, which are two fields in here, which is a great way if you have a longer form to be able to scroll down and edit the areas that you need to. Next, we could toggle over to visibility. And there's a quick description here. Configuring, I'll just read it. Configuring visibilities determines what step assignees can see and do when they open the form, what they can see and do when they open the form on their assigned step. Each input has a visibility assigned for each step. Notification recipients cannot interact with inputs on the form. Visibilities only determine what notification recipients can see. So we have two different options. One is the steps and the notifications, and we will get to that as we're building out the form, but I wanted to point out all that we can see here. So here we have the components, our navigation tree. This we call our our canvas. And then on the right-hand side are properties associated with each of the components. So the one that I have selected is a section, and it's showing me all the properties available for a section. If I were to click into the submitter name, it would show me all of the properties available for the submitter name. When you're building out a Droplet form, we will always need the submitter name and email. And the ID is the thing that we need the most. So if you don't want to call it submitter name, that's fine. You can change the label here to just be name, for example, and email. But these IDs need to exist on the form so that when it is submitted, we know who it is submitted by and can keep track of that on our all submissions page and also associated with their account. So you'll be able to see here, submitted by. Okay, so I am going to be building out, and I'll drag it over here so you can see it real quick, this application form. So there are a few things that I will need to do when building out this form. It looks like I have a few different sections. I'm going to try to make this quick so we can get to all areas of the builder. I'll be building out the applicant information, education, and then the signature piece down here, as well as the header that we're seeing. So that is my reference. I'm going to pull it back over to where I can see it while I'm building. All right. So building out that header, I want to scroll down, or I can search here for an image component. Once you find the component that you're looking for, or if you're still just not sure which one, if you hover over the component, you'll see a brief description and a place to learn more about that particular component, which will take you to a documentation article that'll give you some more information. So I want to include an image here, and you'll see that this canvas and what we kind of view it as is being 12 columns of width here, which are represented by this right here. So if I wanted a really tiny image only in that one column space here, I would be able to change the width. And that's how that works. The other thing I will want is a text here. And I want this text to say Droplet Community Schools. And that should be a header. And then below this, I just want something a little smaller, and I'll put Droplet's business address here. And something that that Droplet is in the process of doing is moving. We used to have the align option over here, moving all of the text options into this area here. Right now, align is not included in that, and I do want this to be centered. So I'm just going to switch over here and into that text component. I'm going to do align center, and it's giving me an error. So I'm going to delete that real quick and bring it back. Okay. Now that is interesting. I'm going to refresh my page. my components disappeared for a second, which is something I will let engineering know about. Okay, and I'm bringing the image back. And here I can just click to find, to drop an image in or select an image to upload. And I have logo that I'm looking for. I will find in my documents. And drag over here. Okay, now this is looking way smaller than I want it to be, and you can see the size here. If I adjust that, I might be able to get the size that I want. And here, I want that bolded. I could change the size to whatever looks good. And that's looking, okay. I can mess around with the settings a little bit, but I think I want to move on. And I like to, in my styling here, I like to include some dividers. And I can choose any color that I want. Here, I can enter in if I have my organization's brand. I can grab the hex code and just enter it in here. I can select a color that looks good, changing how thick that looks. If I want it to go a little bit further wide. And then if I'm dividing out some different things, I can change it to be a vertical axis versus horizontal. Okay. Now I want to build out more of this applicant information area. So I actually want to define it out. I like how that looked in my previous form. So I'm going to keep that. And it says applicant information, bold, italicize, and maybe change the size to 18. Something that I like to do is I like to keep my sections pretty clean and maybe only have a couple. These sections pop up anytime you have a row of something. So it'll reach the full 12, and then if it's a little bit longer, it will wrap down. But otherwise, these sections are defined out as just the row. I like to add all of them to a small area, and then in this section, I give it a border, something a little bit darker. And there you can see that applicant information. And this, I don't want those to wrap like that. So I want it to span the whole distance, so nothing else is on that same line. Okay, now I'm getting into what I am including here. And you'll see some of my preferences come through here in design. Actually, I'm going to keep those as they were. I also need the address. Includes several things. So I might mess around to see if I can fit them all on the same line, or however that would look best. State. And zip code. Okay. And now I need a phone number. So I am adding these input components, which are just a single line. You can type anything, but you can also format these to match your needs. So here I have phone number, and you can see in these props here, the type I can change from text to email to number, and those won't let me type anything else. It won't validate. So if I were to type an email that wasn't actually an email in here, it doesn't have the at something.com or whatever it is, it won't let you submit the form, because it validates that for you. Same with if I selected number, I won't be able to type any letters into that input field. So things to consider if you are accepting numbers in a field. And then the mask is a different way to format this component. So the mask here, I want to be a phone number. I'm going to throw in a guide, and here's a little tool tip if you to understand what guides are. So it'll display as they are entering in the values to help them understand the formatting. And I'll also include some placeholder text here. So people know what they are expected to enter here. I can also add a hint, which is below the field, or a tooltip, which we saw here as something that appears here. And I can put cell phone number or something here. It's not super applicable. This is something that people easily understand, but if there's a field that's a little bit more complex and you want to add some further instruction, you can add a tooltip or a hint, which appears below the field. Phone number. And then I want to show you all a really cool functionality that comes in some of the logic fields. So this logic area, I skipped over when I was explaining these here. But they are super important as we are wanting to make this form more functional, a little bit more intuitive, and only displaying the information that they need. And I'll demonstrate that right now with this field that says, are you currently employed by Droplet Community Schools? And the options here, I only want two, which are yes or no. And I will say I've dragged over for this particular field a radio component, which only gives you the option to answer one or the other. There are a few other field like components that give you options to select, and those would be check boxes, which give you the option to select multiple, or a drop down, which gives you either a selection of one, or if you click this, you can select multiple. In this case, I don't want to select multiple. I just want them to be able to select one or the other. Okay. Another thing that I failed to mention here, and something that's important, these IDs are how the form associates each component and keeps track of what those are. they will always be different. You can't have the same ID listed twice, but these labels that we are seeing, they can be the same. Like I could put name several different places, but that ID will need to be different. And you can edit this, and I do recommend editing them, because if you are adding in some more functionality on your form, it'll be much easier to use a system that you understand, or a phrasing that you understand here. So I'm going to put previously or currently employed. And you'll notice I used something that we call camel casing. IDs will not accept any spaces. So a great way to, maybe if you want to use multiple words like I did, is to keep the first word lowercase, and every other word you will add the first letter to be capitalized, and that is camel casing. So now I'll be able to reference that if I need to, which I do. So if I want, after that field is entered, if they say yes, I want this field to say years employed. I want them to enter in those years. And here I'm changing it to a number. I don't want to accept any letters in that. But I only want this field to be visible if they select yes. Otherwise, it's not applicable to anybody. Here, I'm going to change this to years. And now within this one, this is the one that I'm changing the display logic on. So this is where I want that to be. I'm going to click over here within the logic. And if you hover, you can see this is display. So if, and that one that we used before is different. I thought I copied it. So currently employed. So if currently employed, and I do a triple equals, which means it's definitely equal to, and I say yes here. So if it is yes, that's going to be true, and it's going to display. So anytime what we run through here, these logic expressions, if the logic expression evaluates to be true, it will display. If it evaluates to be false, it won't display, which is what I want to do in this case, because if it is not even answered yet, I still don't want this to be seen. And I will demonstrate how that looks real quick. So if I come up here to the debug view, I can see what the form looks like for a user in different steps. So if I have multiple steps in the workflow, I'll be able to change and see what they are able to see on those steps. So here's how that looks. If I select yes, years employed pops up. Okay, so that's I'm gonna add, I guess, just one or two more here. So desired position, and the posting number. And I can format these if I wanted to. So if I had something specific, a specific way that posting numbers are added, like 2 digits, then a dash, then 4 digits, I can format that, or I can just leave it as open so they can type what they want in there. Next, I'm going to add a new area to the form. And in this area, I want it to be a table. And here, I'm going to put institution name. So this will be our education section. So institution name, then I want location. Date. I'm going to put degree here. And then I'm going to add another column by pressing that button here. Dates attended. Okay, so you can see while I'm working on this table, it gives me quite a few options here in the properties, which you can explore and you can also learn more about when you hover over the table component to understand tables a little bit more. We have display logic, we have display rows logic. I can set the initial rows to just one. I could set, it has to have a minimum row, or you can only have 5 rows on here. Allow the person to delete any rows if they accidentally add some. Hence, tooltips, name, and then ID. I'm going to want to change here. Okay, and then inside of the table, each column will also have its own properties. So I can change these. If dates attended was maybe just one date, I might change this I might change this type to be a date or instead. So oftentimes with like timesheets or things, we use tables and you'll include like a date and time for clocking in, clocking out, that kind of thing. I could change them to numbers. I can make it a checkbox or a drop down with options. Each of these columns have their own properties as well. So I'm going to make that just simple. It starts out just one line, and then they can add multiple if they need to, and save that. And now the last thing that I want to do is add a signature. And I'll show you the best practice that our team always does. And I could rename that. This looks fine to me. With the signature, we like to add down here this timestamp. And here we'll use that display logic again. So you'll see that we called this one signature 1. So once signature 1 is populated, I want it to open up this timestamp, which will put the time that the signature was added, the date and time. So that way people aren't manually entering in that time. It's just captured from when they sign. And I do that by, again, going to the display logic. And I use a little helper function. And there are several that you can find in documentation. So this one is not blank. So once this signature, once signature 1 is not blank, this will display. And I will demonstrate that. So I'm going to refresh this page. So I've signed, and it gave me the date and the time here. Another thing you'll want to use while you are in this debug is just doing a quick submit to see what things are required for your submitter. So I can see that all of these fields are required. If there were ones that I wanted to make optional, I would find them and toggle this off so that it is no longer required. And if I save that and I test again, you'll see this no longer has the red outline showing me that it's required. Okay. So that's what I want the applicant to fill out. I also want to consider what this form process looks like. So after the applicant submits their portion, who does it go to? What are they doing with the form? A lot of that is done within the workflow, but I also want to consider what they are doing with the form. So I think when an applicant finishes their piece of this form and they submit it, it's going to go to someone from HR who reviews it and writes in some notes. So I'm going to add in this multi-line here, let it span the whole area, and I'm going to call it internal notes. I might also add a radio that says something like applicant status. And I'll have the options be interviewed, rejected, requires further review. I'm going to rename this to applicant status. Okay. And these are things that I won't want visible to the employee, to the potential employee when they're filling out the form. And by default, anything that you add within the visual builder is going to show up for on the initial step. So that start step, I can see the internal notes here are already there. I don't want those to be seen. And that's something that I will change once I have a workflow and I can come back into visibility. So now I have an idea of what the process will be after the initial submission. And I can come in here and I can kind of define that out visually using this workflow. Well, I don't want the path to go straight from start to be completed. I can drag and drop these, zoom out a little bit if I want some more space. I can add, make these make sense to where you're going. Once I start, and I'm just going to realize I am not talking about what I'm doing. Here we have two different options, and I'm going to zoom back in so you can see what happens when I hover over these again. One is the submission pathway. So once somebody hits submit, and the other is the reject pathway, which typically isn't available on the start step to begin with. They can't reject something that's never been submitted. So what you'll want to do is to find which pathway, which direction you want from this and define a step. So once it's submitted, I want it to go to HR review. I'm going to assign that, and I can do that either dynamically or a static assignment if it goes to just one person all the time, or if it'll go to a different person based on something that's selected. I would want to make it a dynamic assignment. In this case, it should just be static. It's going to Aaron, HR. And if I open this details panel, I can see a little bit more on here, different options I can take. This step condition only applies when you want to skip this step. So if there is a potential that this step will be skipped, you'll want to put in that logic here, and you click and you can put in an expression. If you need help creating those JavaScript expressions, there are examples in the help documentation, or you can reach out to us at support@droplet.io and we'll happily help you manage that workflow if there are conditions. Another way is this transition. So if, it should once it's submitted, it either goes to review or it goes to maybe if they have already worked here, I don't want it to go to review and I want it to go to like internal hires step and assign it to maybe somebody higher up, like the superintendent. I can make that optional. So it'll either go here or it will go here. And that's something that's defined in these transitions. So here I can see that there's no condition set. It'll just go to the first one listed here. And the way it works, and you can read more about this in this description or in the documentation, but it'll check each of these. And if it matches what you've defined as the condition to send here, then it'll go there. So in this case, I want it to go to HR review when that currently employed field that we have is equal to this time no. And if it's not, it'll default here, which is exactly how I want it. From there, I'll just make it simple, and both of these, once they're done, will go to completed. Once they've submitted, that submit pathway. And if they are rejected, I want them to go to rejected. So very simple workflow with a little bit of conditions here. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is come back and make sure that the applicant isn't seeing the things that they don't need to see. So I'm going to switch over to this visibility. Here we can see that definition again. Now I have more in here in my navigation tree. I want to select this one, and I don't want it visible on the start step. So it's going to list all of the steps that you have in your workflow. It's going to show you whether it's editable, read only, which means you can see it, but you can't make any edits. It'll be grayed out like this. Or hidden, which means they cannot see it at all. So I'm going to make it hidden on that start step, but editable on HR review and editable on the internal hires step. Same with this option here. I am going to hide that on the start step, but make it editable here. And everything else, when it's completed or rejected, I don't want people to be able to make edits to it. So it will be read only. And that looks good there. So I'm going to save that. Last thing I'm going to want to do is make sure that I have notifications in place. So by default, when you create a workflow, if it moves either direction, so let's say it moves to the HR review step, Erin HR will receive an email saying that they have an assignment in Droplet they need to complete. So this send to assignee, if I clicked on the details and I go to the notifications tab, this send to assignee is where I can make any edits to that default email. So here is the default email. I want it to be a little bit more descriptive and say new application awaiting your review. If I wanted to add more details, I can add information from the form itself using what we call string interpolation, which is adding that ID. So the first one that I remembered was that currently employed, and wrapping it in 2 of these hashtags. So wrapping means on each side. And that will give me the dynamic value that's entered into this every time that there's a new application. Whatever they answer in that field will show on this notification, which I don't actually want that to be seen. The next thing that we can do, so those are the assignment notifications. The next thing we can do is add other notifications. If other people are involved in the process, being that they just see the form. They need to be aware of the form, but don't necessarily need to do anything. They will want to receive a notification and not be included in the workflow process. So the notification, let's say it moves, and you can choose when it triggers. So it's either when it enters into this step or when it leaves that step. Those are the triggers. So I say when the applicant enters in their information, I want them to receive a notification. So as soon as it leaves, I want them to receive a notification that says, thank you for applying with Droplet. Maybe not so much in the subject line. And I can style this how I want to. I can also include in this arrowed drop down here, we have merge fields. So this is information that's associated with the submission. Here, I want the submitter's first name. Hello, submitter's first name. Thank you for applying with Droplet Community Schools. We have received your application and will be reviewing it promptly. Thank you. Something like that. And then what I want to do is assign a recipient or multiple recipients. In this case, I just want it to send to the submitter. And this notification condition would be only to send if it meets these conditions. Otherwise, it will always send. In this case, it's always going to send when it leaves that start step. You can add as many notifications as you want to any of the triggers. Whoops. And I also want to include a rejection notification. So when it enters into the rejected, once it's rejected, I'm say, oh, I hate rejecting people, so this is hard for me. Let's see. Application reviewed. And here I want to do another merge field, which will be, computer's running a little slow, I'm sorry. The submitter's first name again. Thank you so much for applying with Droplet Community Schools. We have reviewed your application and have decided to move forward with another applicant at this time. Please consider applying with us again in the future. You can see all our open positions here, and I can add in a link to our posting site. Which I don't have a posting site for this fake school, so I'm going to leave that as is. And if it's completed, if it's the application has been approved and maybe they're moving forward with this particular applicant, I might want to send it to our payroll department, letting them know new hire, and then put information in here. And I'll show you, Sorry, I got an error. Oh, it's just empty right there because I deleted it. Okay, so the last thing we can do within this visibility toggle is I can change what somebody is seeing versus what's hidden for them. So if I were to include a notification to the submitter, which I do on the rejected step, I don't want them to see our internal notes. So I am going to, on that notification that's rejected, I'm going to hide that. I'm also going to hide this status. I don't want them to be able to see that if I included the link. And if I save that, which I'm now realizing I did not include a recipient here. You can also, like, if it might not be applicable in this situation, you can review your application. And then add a merge field, which is the link, which will give them access to view this submission. And that's when, if they click that link, they'll be able to only see the things that we've defined for them to see. In that visibility notifications here, I can see they won't see that application status or internal notes. So that's a very, very quick demonstration of how to use the builder and all of the different areas within the builder that will affect your form building. We also have a few extra ones within our code editor that will be coming to Visual Builder at some point in the future. Those are tags, translations, and data sets. So if you have information connected via a data set, it will show you which data set it's connected to. Translations, if you wanted to include a different language. And then tags, if you wanted to bring to the surface of this all submissions page, if you want to have it lifted, each of the information entered into that specific submission for a certain component, you would include that there. But yes, thank you so much for attending today's training. If you have any questions, now would be a great time